Hello and welcome. I'm James A. Zima and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump visits China for high-stakes summit with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Russian attacks kill 6 as Ukraine hits Moscow's gas facilities after ceasefire expires. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan arrives in Kazakhstan on a state visit. U.S. President Donald Trump is visiting Beijing for the first time since 2017. The meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to focus on trade disputes, rare earth exports, and tensions over Taiwan. Here's more.
U.S. President Donald Trump is due to arrive in Beijing on Wednesday, ahead of 2 days of talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. It will be the first face-to-face meeting between the two leaders in more than 6 months, and Trump's first visit to China since 2017. The summit comes as fighting linked to Iran continues to disrupt shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump said he does not believe Washington needs China's help to end the conflict.
With the Iranians, do you think he can help in any way?
No, I don't think we need any help with Iran. We'll win it one way or the other. We'll win it peacefully or otherwise.
Trade is expected to be one of the main issues on the agenda, as Washington and Beijing discuss extending a truce over Chinese restrictions on rare earth exports. The materials are essential for defense systems, electronics, and electric vehicles. Chinese customs data shows exports of several specialized rare earth minerals remain sharply lower than before controls were introduced last year in response to Trump's tariffs. Taiwan is also expected to be a major point of tension during the summit. China repeated its opposition to U.S. arms sales to the island on Wednesday, after the Trump administration approved an $11 billion weapons package for Taiwan in December. In Beijing, security was tightened ahead of Trump's arrival, while some residents expressed skepticism about the visit.
He's not trustworthy. He's like, 80 years old now? He's quite old. He sure loves to stir things up. He's always getting into conflicts with other countries and stuff. Honestly, I have a really bad impression of him.
I don't know if he's genuinely sincere about this, but speaking as a Chinese person and as someone working in trade, I just hope some good policies can come out of this.
More than a dozen American business executives are expected to accompany Trump during the visit, with possible Chinese purchases of Boeing aircraft and U.S. agricultural products also likely to be discussed.
NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang is joining U.S. President Donald Trump on his visit to Beijing, raising Chinese hopes that a long-running dispute over advanced AI chip sales could finally see progress. Huang's visit is being closely watched in China, where companies are hoping it could help unlock access to NVIDIA's powerful H200 AI chips. The chips are widely seen as critical for advanced artificial intelligence systems and remain ahead of China's domestic alternatives. Sources say Huang's presence is being viewed by some Chinese tech firms as a positive signal that stalled discussions over chip sales could be to begin moving forward. Iran has lodged a complaint against the U.S. at the Hague Court of Arbitration over military attacks on its nuclear facilities, economic sanctions, and threats of force, a development seen as a sign of growing strain in the Islamic Republic's standoff with the United States.
Iran has filed a lawsuit against the United States at the Hague Court of Arbitration over 3 instances of military aggression against Iranian nuclear facilities, imposition of economic sanctions, and threat of resorting to force. According to the Tasnim semi-official news agency affiliated to the Revolutionary Guards, the case was filed at the Iran-US Arbitration Court based on provisions of the 1981 Algiers Declaration. The petition has cited the U.S. violation of its international obligations in the 12-day joint war with Israel against Iran last June. Based on the first paragraph of the Algiers Declaration, the US government is committed not to interfere directly or indirectly, politically or militarily in Iran's internal affairs. In its petition, Iran has cited the Algiers Declaration, referring to the instances of the US's violation of its commitment during the imposed 12-day war, as well as the imposition of economic sanctions and the renewed threat of resorting to force against Iran. Tehran has also requested the court to condemn Washington for violating the declaration and to require it to immediately end its direct and indirect interference in Iran's internal affairs, to provide a guarantee that such violations will not be repeated, and to compensate Iran for the war damages. Amid stalled talks with the US in the wake of the second Israel-US war on Iran, which broke out on 28th of February, the news of Iran's legal complaint can serve as another stumbling block in the ongoing diplomatic efforts to reach an interim deal to end the war. Turaj Shiralilu from downtown Tehran for A News.
Now, Russia and Ukraine are trading accusations after a short US-mediated ceasefire expired on Monday, with renewed strikes hitting both countries.
Russia resumed large-scale attacks on Ukraine after a three-day ceasefire linked to Friday's commemoration of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. Ukrainian officials say more than 200 drones were launched overnight into Tuesday, damaging energy facilities, apartment buildings, a kindergarten, and a civilian locomotive. In the Dnipropetrovsk region, local authorities said at least 6 people were killed. 2 people died after a drone struck an apartment building in Kryvyi Rih, the hometown of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. 4 others were killed in an aerial bomb attack northeast of the city. Zelensky accused Russia of continuing its attacks after the ceasefire expired, while Kyiv said Moscow had escalated the conflict instead of extending the pause in fighting.
Ukraine has stated that we will respond in kind to Russia. We offered a ceasefire. Unfortunately, after 3 days of relative calm, there have been more Shahed attacks and airstrikes. Activity on the front lines remains high. Therefore, we are responding.
On the front line, Ukraine's military reported 170 combat clashes over the past 24 hours, with the heaviest fighting concentrated around Kostiantynivka and Pokrovsk in eastern Ukraine. Kyiv also said its forces struck gas facilities in Russia's central Orenburg region, more than 1,500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Saturday that the conflict was coming to an end, a position the Kremlin reiterated on Tuesday. US President Donald Trump also said the end of the war appeared to be very close.
Yeah, I think it's getting very close. The end of the war in Ukraine, I really think it's getting very close.
But Zelensky rejected that assessment on Monday, saying Russia showed no intention of ending the war and warning that Ukraine was preparing for further attacks. Moscow said it would welcome continued US mediation efforts and that Putin could meet Zelensky once a peace process is finalized. However, major differences remain unresolved, with Russia demanding additional territory and Ukraine insisting that Russian forces withdraw from occupied areas.
As Westminster opened a new parliamentary session today, attention was split between the government's ambitious legislative agenda and growing political turbulence inside the ruling Labour Party. Our correspondent has more.
Political pressures mounting on Prime Minister Keir Starmer after 4 ministers resigned from the government, calling for him to step down following Labour's heavy local election losses. Today, Starmer held talks with Health Secretary West Routing at Downing Street amid growing speculation over a possible leadership challenge. The meeting lasted less than 20 minutes, with Downing Street insisting the Prime Minister remains focused on governing. The crisis comes as King Charles III delivered the King's speech during the state opening of Parliament, outlining the government's legislative agenda for the coming year, with ministers promising action on the cost of living, economic growth and national security. The king said the government will support measures to ease pressure on households and strengthen economic ties with the European Union, while new legislation would encourage airport expansion and speed up road building projects. The speech also confirmed increased investment in policing, the NHS and the justice system, alongside continued funding for apprenticeship, as ministers attempt to tackle rising youth unemployment and child poverty. King Charles also announced plans to introduce digital ID systems to modernize public services, while ministers will increase long-term investment in social housing and continue reforms to the leasehold system, including caps on ground rents. National security and energy independence featured heavily throughout the address. The king said the government would continue supporting the armed forces and their families, while new legislation would boost clean energy production and expand Britain's nuclear energy sector to reduce dependence on foreign powers. The government also pledged to continue tackling climate change, poverty and violence against women and girls, while preparing for the UK's G20 presidency next year, ahead of hosting the 2027 summit. Zena Farisata, A-News, London, United Kingdom.
Now, the World Health Organization says more hantavirus cases linked to the cruise ship MV Honduras could still emerge in the coming weeks, despite no current sign of wider community spread. Health authorities across Europe continue monitoring evacuated passengers as quarantine and medical checks remain in place.
The World Health Organization says more hantavirus cases linked to the cruise ship MV Honduras could still emerge in the coming weeks, as health authorities across Europe continue monitoring evacuated passengers and crew. WHO says 11 hantavirus cases are now linked to the cruise ship MV Honduras, including 9 confirmed infections of the Andes strain and 2 suspected cases. 3 people linked to the outbreak have died. Confirmed and suspected cases are now under isolation or medical monitoring following a multinational evacuation operation in Tenerife. Health officials say the Andes strain is unusual because it can spread between people in rare cases, though experts stress it is far less contagious than COVID-19. The WHO says there is currently no sign of wider community transmission, but warned more cases could still emerge because the virus can take weeks before symptoms appear. Among the latest confirmed infections is a French passenger who became ill after being evacuated from the ship and is now in intensive care in Paris. French President Emmanuel Macron said strict quarantine protocols were in place for all identified contacts.
Today, the government undoubtedly has some of the most stringent protocols, like Spain and a few others, which is a good thing because we have past experience. However, it's not a matter of comparing what's not comparable. This is a virus which is known to have characteristics different from what we saw during COVID-19. And so, the government has made the right decisions. The situation is under control, under its authority, thanks to our healthcare workers. I want to thank you. Now, it's important that there be real European coordination, meaning that the protocols move towards the most demanding standards that have been defined in the very short term, and that the World Health Organization can coordinate all of this, as it should.
Doctors treating the patient say she is suffering from a severe cardiopulmonary form of the disease and is being treated with an artificial lung.
The patient currently has the most severe form of cardiopulmonary presentation and is receiving what is at the final stage of supportive care, extracorporeal circulation for artificial oxygenation. She has a heart-lung machine, a blood diversion, which we hope will allow her to get through this critical period while her lung, damaged by the virus, and the vascular wall recover.
Spanish authorities have also confirmed another positive hantavirus case among passengers quarantined in Madrid.
Leaders from NATO's eastern flank are meeting in Bucharest for the B9 summit, with Ukraine, the US and Nordic allies also participating. Romanian President Nicos Dan is hosting the summit alongside Polish President Karol Nawrocki. The talks focus on eastern flank security, higher defense spending, support for Ukraine and preparations for the NATO summit in Ankara in July. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and senior US officials are among the participants. Leaders are expected to adopt a joint declaration at the end of the summit. China is urging Pakistan to play a greater diplomatic role in easing tensions surrounding Iran and the Strait of Hormuz. Our correspondent has more from Beijing.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has urged Pakistan to intensify its mediation efforts between Iran and the United States, especially regarding the reopening of the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz. During a phone call with Pakistani Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq Dar, Wang emphasized the need for diplomatic engagement to maintain regional stability and ensure safe maritime navigation through one of the world's most important energy transit routes. China reaffirmed its support for Pakistan's growing role as a mediator in the ongoing US-Iran negotiations, as Islamabad continues efforts to facilitate another round of talks aimed at preventing further escalation in the Middle East. The discussions come during heightened international concern over disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, which carries a significant share of global oil shipments and remains central to global energy security. The diplomatic push also comes ahead of the highly anticipated high-level talks between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing, where the Middle East conflict and maritime security are expected to feature prominently. Beijing has increasingly positioned itself as a supporter of diplomatic solutions while balancing its strategic ties with Tehran and its overall global economic interests. Manamuthu, A-News, Beijing.
Now, Polish farmers are being hit by the fallout from rising tensions in the Middle East, with soaring fertilizer and fuel prices driving up the cost of food production. Many are now changing the way they farm to stay competitive.
Poland's agricultural sector is feeling the impact of growing instability in the Middle East, as disruptions to global energy and supply chains push up farming costs. The US-Israeli war on Iran and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz have sent global prices for oil, gas and fertilizers sharply higher. The Strait of Hormuz is a major route for global energy supplies and also handles significant volumes of fertilizer exports. The disruption has had a direct impact on nitrogen fertilizers, which are produced using gas. Viktor Smulewicz, president of Poland's National Council of Agricultural Chambers, says farmers are now facing much higher production costs.
In Poland, we have nitrogen plants that produce nitrogen, but they produce it on the basis of gas, which has become more expensive, so the prices of fertilizers have also increased. Many farmers have no choice but to buy these fertilizers, and the production costs will be much higher. Fertilizer costs are quite a significant expense of agricultural production, reaching 50% and sometimes even more.
As costs rise, some farmers are adjusting what they grow in order to reduce spending. Farmer Maciej Wrochik says he is focusing more on soybeans because they require less fertilizer than many other crops.
Soybeans don't need a lot of fertilizers. The soybean don't need nitrogen fertilizers, so the costs of production are much lower than on the other plants.
Agricultural officials in Poland say the tensions around the Strait of Hormuz are also affecting exports, adding further pressure on farmers already struggling with weaker purchasing power.
All right, after the break, we'll examine the outcomes of the UK-France-led meeting on restoring commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz as Western powers move from diplomatic coordination toward operational planning. Stay with us. Welcome back to News. Now, the United Kingdom and France have moved forward with plans for a multinational mission aimed at restoring commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, including escort operations, mine-clearing capabilities, and expanded naval coordination. To help us unpack this is Tobias Elwood, former UK Minister for the Middle East in Okinawa, Japan. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Good afternoon to you.
Now, with concrete military plans replacing diplomatic talk, Is Europe finally moving toward a more independent security role rather than relying entirely on Washington's regional posture?
I think you summarize it very well. This move from talking about support of working together, the international community, perhaps away from America, and dealing with the challenge at hand. The ceasefire in the Gulf is now in 4 weeks old, but it is showing its age. There is a huge risk of miscalculation, of a return to war, but nevertheless, the economic fallout of the war is being felt right across the world, and particularly in the UK. And this is why the UK Prime Minister and other nations have got together to say, well, what can we do about it? This is so important. We can't continue to watch this or hold out for a potential agreement between America when there is so much distance between what each is trying to achieve. So this is an advance. It's very new and not been tested in any way yet as to whether we have the modern operational capabilities to provide the security that's required to keep effectively an insurgency, rudimentary capabilities of drone warfare, to keep the straits open, to allow the transition of the oil and gas ships out of the Straits of Hormuz.
Now, in your opinion, what is the most significant outcome of this summit? Is it the demining drones, the naval escorts, or the coalition itself?
Well, it's both. We can separate them operationally, of the international community, of the like-minded ones willing to coordinate, and it will require a huge level of collaboration operationally between military forces. That's on the one hand. It's not been done in such a scenario before, simply because the advance of the character of conflict, because we see drones come into the battlefield space. And then secondly, as you imply, this is a world having to deal with the consequence of the United States rather than following the leadership of the United States. And that, again, is new waters. We've not been here before for many, many years.
Now, this mission is described as strictly defensive and separate from Project Freedom, as you just mentioned. Does this reflect a growing transatlantic difference over the handling of Iran?
I think it does, and it isn't just Iran. Bear in mind, at the beginning of the year, we saw what America did in Venezuela, and then Donald Trump turned up in Davos, claiming Greenland. And when you put that next to what Donald Trump has done in trying to bring President Putin in to actually support Russia, rather than Ukraine, as the rest of Europe is, you see that there is a disjoint, a gulf of opinion where Europe wants to go internationally and geopolitically, and where America wants to go. So Iran has just confirmed the direction of travel that we've actually been seeing ever since Donald Trump returned to the White House.
Now, over 40 nations participated in these ministerial talks, but how many are realistically prepared to commit meaningful military assets rather than just political support?
Yeah, I mean, that is the big question, because the 40 nations were there because it's in their economic interests to see those ships be able to return back to normal. But how you translate that desire into an operational capability, that will be the biggest test. I mean, even Britain, I have to say, is being stretched to the limit when it comes to maritime capabilities to pursue this new mission. And I'm sure that will be the same with other countries. And clearly, we require the buy-in, the recognition and support of Iran itself. How long could you keep an operation of this scale working? Is it going to be 6 months? Is it going to be a year? Is it simply going to be there until there is an agreement between America and Iran? So many unknowns. But the pressure is all about economically being able to get those ships moving out, because it's costing economies. It's increasing inflation in all these countries that are so reliant on this narrow passage, which is now Iran has got such a stranglehold.
Now, I have one more final question for you, sir. Now, without a UN mandate, how does this coalition avoid being labeled maritime outlaws while operating in waters Iran claims are under its direct national sovereignty?
Yeah, that is a legal question that I'm sure many will pose. The challenge we face, though, is that it would be normal for any nation to go to the United to secure that resolution, which would give the legal top cover to an operation like this exist. But if there is stalemate at the Security Council because one or more of the permanent members yield their ability to use their vetoes, then the international community has no choice but to work together under standard international laws, under the rights and the abilities to defend yourself, in order to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz can stay open. So, whilst it's preferred, it's not 100% required for this action to take place.
That was Tobias Elwood, former UK Minister for the Middle East in Okinawa, Japan. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your time and insight with us.
Thank you.
All right, after the break, we'll take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Stay with us. Welcome back to A News. Now, Azerbaijan and Slovakia are deepening their strategic partnership with new areas of cooperation discussed during high-level talks in Baku. President Ilham Aliyev received a Slovak delegation led by National Council Speaker Richard Raši on Wednesday. The talks focused on political and parliamentary ties, as well as cooperation in trade, energy, defense industry, technology, education and tourism. Raši said he would visit the Karabakh region to see reconstruction work and Karabakh University in Kankendi. The two sides also discussed Azerbaijan-Armenia peace efforts, Slovak involvement in rebuilding Bashgavand village in Agdam, and plans for direct Baku-Bratislava flights. Now, Baku is set to host a record-breaking 13th World Urban Forum, with over 32,000 participants arriving from across the globe. A recent media tour of the Baku Olympic Stadium showcased the massive 53-hectare venue, now transformed into a high-tech hub for this historic event. Let's take a look.
We are reporting from the Baku Olympic Stadium, where a media tour was recently organized to showcase the venue's readiness as the city prepares to host the 13th session of the World Urban Forum. This isn't just another international meeting with over 32,000 participants registered from 180 countries. This session has already officially become the largest in the forum's history.
The venue for the WUF 13 event covers 53 hectares, including the Baku Olympic Stadium and the overall operational scope formed around it. Of this, 10 hectares are designated for transportation. Urban planning traditions were prioritized in the design of the Baku Olympic Stadium. The stadium is divided into various zones. Zone A consists of 5 streets, each named after different cities in Azerbaijan. The Urban Expo Zone covers 3.5 hectares. This area will accommodate exhibition spaces for all participants. A total of 41 countries will participate with pavilions, including the Azerbaijan Pavilion, which covers 1,500 square meters.
Here, up to 300 sessions and meetings will take place every single day, whether it's high-level diplomatic talks in the specialized VIP zones or technical workshops in the 121 pavilions at the Urban Expo.
The media center is located in an area that is easily accessible from any point. more than 1,000 media representatives are registered for WUF13, approximately 200 of whom are foreign media members. For live broadcasts, 14 rooms have been allocated to media representatives. Additionally, there are 2 dialogue rooms on site with a capacity of nearly 500 people.
For Azerbaijan, this is a historic moment to show the world its vision for the future. For the first time in WUF history, a leader summit has been added to the program. As the final countdown begins, all eyes are now on Baku, ready to welcome the world for this record-breaking event and shape the future of our cities.
The phone conversation took place on Wednesday between Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov and his Iranian counterpart Saeed Abbas Arakchi. The ministers discussed Azerbaijan-Iran bilateral relations, the current regional situation, and ongoing negotiations related to Iran. Arakchi briefed his Azerbaijani counterpart on the latest developments in the negotiation process. Bayramov reiterated Azerbaijan's support for resolving the situation through peaceful dialogue and negotiations. Now let's take a look at a new economic forecast from Azerbaijani analyst Firdevsi Fikretza, outlining how trade between Azerbaijan and Armenia could develop if lasting peace and stable relations are achieved between the two South Caucasus neighbors. The study highlights both the potential scale of future trade and the key sectors expected to drive it.
A new economic forecast outlines the potential scale of future trade between Azerbaijan and Armenia, suggesting that bilateral trade could reach between $400 million and $600 million under conditions of lasting peace and stable economic relations. The assessment, prepared by economist Firdevsi Fikretzadeh, examines possible economic ties emerging from ongoing normalization efforts between the two South Caucasus neighbors. Within the projected structure of trade, energy products are expected to be the largest contributor, accounting for around $130 to $170 million in value. The analysis further outlines export potential from both sides. Azerbaijan's exports to Armenia are estimated at roughly $270 to $375 million in total, driven mainly by fuel and petrochemical products. On the other side, Armenia's exports to Azerbaijan are projected at around $150 to $215 million, with metals, particularly copper concentrate and molybdenum, forming the largest share. Azerbaijan's export basket would also include construction materials and agricultural goods, while Armenia would additionally supply food products, clothing and footwear. The report notes that these projections assume low political risk, functioning border and customs systems, and operational transport infrastructure. It adds that future trade would likely be based more on economic complementarity than direct competition. It concludes that the realization of this potential depends primarily on achieving sustainable peace between Baku and Yerevan.
The Armenian government's press service said that employees of the U.S. company AECOM visited the country to inspect sites linked to the construction of the TRIP project. According to a statement from the Armenian government's press service, Deputy Prime Minister Mayor Grigoryan received the U.S. delegation. During the meeting, U.S. representatives presented the main areas of work related to the feasibility study and outlined the expected results. Now, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has arrived in Astana for a state visit. Following talks in the Kazakh capital, Erdogan is also expected to take part in the informal summit of the Organization of Turkic States in Turkestan. Our correspondent has more from Almaty.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has arrived in Astana on a state visit at the invitation of Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. The talks are expected to focus on trade, investment and transport connectivity as both countries look to deepen strategic cooperation. The visit comes just a month after a meeting of the Kazakh-Turkey Intergovernmental Commission on Trade and Economic Cooperation in Astana, attended by Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz. During the talks, both sides reaffirmed plans to expand the Middle Corridor, the trade route linking China and Europe through Central Asia, the Caspian Sea, the South Caucasus and Turkey. Transport logistics are becoming an increasingly important part of relations between Astana and Ankara. By the end of 2025, railway cargo traffic between Kazakhstan and Turkey had increased by 35%, reaching 6.4 million tons. Cargo volumes along the Trans-Caspian international transport route exceeded 4 million tons. The growing importance of the corridor reflects broader shifts in Eurasian supply chains as countries across the region look to reduce dependence on traditional transit routes and expand the alternative connections between Asia and Europe. Economic cooperation is also gaining momentum. Turkey remains among Kazakhstan's top 5 trading partners. Bilateral trade increased by 9% last year, reaching $1.5 billion. Astana is now seeking to expand exports of higher value-added products, including metallurgy, pharmaceuticals, agricultural processing, and machinery manufacturing. Energy and petrochemicals are another major focus. Kazakhstan is planning petrochemical projects totaling around $15 billion, with Turkish companies invited to participate. The sector is expected to become one of the key areas of long-term cooperation between Astana and Ankara, with several bilateral agreements likely to be signed during Erdogan's visit. The trip will also coincide with the informal summit of the Organization of Turkic States in Turkestan on May 15th, where regional leaders are expected to discuss artificial intelligence, digital development and broader cooperation across Central Asia. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Now on the sidelines of Uzbekistan Energy Week 2026, Uzbek Naftogaz, SOCAR and British Petroleum signed a major agreement aimed at expanding hydrocarbon exploration in Uzbekistan's Ustyurt region. The agreement focuses on geological exploration and future hydrocarbon production across 6 investment blocks in the region. Alongside energy cooperation, SOCAR is also expanding educational partnership in Uzbekistan through the Baku Higher Oil School, with the launch of a dual diploma master's program in oil and gas technology in partnership with Bukhara State Technical University and the Tashkent Chemical Technological Institute. All right, after the break, we'll examine the major agreements and strategic partnership emerging from Uzbekistan Energy Week, including SOCAR's expanding role in the country's energy sector. Stay with us. Welcome back to WAY News. Now, Uzbekistan Energy Week has brought renewed attention to Central Asia's growing importance in regional energy politics, with major agreements involving SOCAR, BP and Uzbek energy institutions. Joining us now to discuss this is Özgür Güven, sustainability and energy expert from Ankara, Turkey. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
Now, SOCAR's...
Hello, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Now, SOCAR's agreements at Uzbekistan's Energy Week suggest Azerbaijan is expanding beyond transit into upstream regional energy influence. How significant is that strategic shift?
As far as from a Turkish point of view, Azerbaijan is already very strong in the Turkish market. I mean, through SOCAR, they are already a big player over here. And I think this is a great move, what Azerbaijan is doing, helping Uzbekistan to connect itself to the European, to the Western markets for energy. I think this is a great initiative.
Now, speaking about that, energy cooperation between Baku and Tashkent has accelerated steadily over the past year. Is this now evolving into a broader strategic alliance rather than regional cooperation alone?
Yes, as I said earlier, Uzbekistan needs to reach out to the international markets. They are limited with their borders. I mean, there is Turkmenistan, as to alternative, there is Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan to the Caspian Sea, or the Russian rivers to the Black Sea. This is their only option if they don't want to sell to China. So I think this is going to bring an international. It will level up Azerbaijan through Azerbaijan's help, definitely.
Now, SOCAR remains the operator of the Ustyurt blocks despite BP's entry. How important is that operational role for Azerbaijan's regional energy ambitions?
I mean, I think this is just going to increase the international recognition of this project. BP's involvement, for some critics, it seems like a disadvantage, but I don't think it that way. I think the BP is including it by 40% of the project, and I think it will bring more international support, international easier financing, and also, as I said, recognition to the project.
Now, as discussions around the Middle Corridor and regional transport links continue, which obviously involves Turkey as well, how closely are energy cooperation and wider connectivity strategies now becoming intertwined?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, maybe that SOCAR is through SOCAR, Azerbaijan is already a very important player in the Turkish energy market, and together with Turkey and Azerbaijan, also I must say that Aramco announced an interest in the Turkish energy market. So maybe in the near future we can hear SOCAR, Turkish TPAO, the Turkish Petroleum Agency, and Aramco together maybe create a new initiative to reach out to the CIS, to reach out to the energy resources of the market. So I think why not? We can hear something like that in the near future.
All right. Now, at a time when countries are publicly emphasizing green transition goals, why are large-scale oil and gas exploration agreements still expanding across the region?
I think with today's conditions, what's happening in the Persian Gulf, everyone on Earth is affected by it. So companies and countries strategically trying to find alternatives to the Persian Gulf. I think this is also part of that. And I'm pretty sure in the rest of the world there will be new explorations. Yes, sustainability, as I am a truly believer of sustainability and true alternative energies, but there is a fact that we are not on that level yet with sustainable energy resources, so we have to continue to use the fossil fuels. So I think this will also have a huge positive impact on finding alternative to the Persian Gulf.
Now, Uzbekistan is seeking energy security while Azerbaijan seeks regional influence and export opportunities. How complementary are these objectives in practical terms?
It definitely has a positive effect. Uzbekistan, as I said earlier, Uzbekistan needs to reach out to the Western markets, and currently they are limited by borders. Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan is on one hand, and on the other hand, there is only one way through the expensive and seasonal Russian routes. So I think this cooperation, after Uzbekistan, it will include several other countries in the region, in the Central Asia, most likely. So Azerbaijan can increase its role to becoming part of this new energy corridor in the Middle Corridor region in general.
Yes, it's good you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you, could deeper Azerbaijan-Uzbekistan energy cooperation gradually alter the balance of economic influence inside Central Asia and the South Caucasus?
Yes, definitely. It will attract, motivate, encourage other nations in the region to be part of this. Because if this project is successful, Uzbekistan will be able to provide their energy, fossil fuels, their energy resources to the European market through Azerbaijan, after through Turkey. And I think the other countries in the region will be including in it. Currently, I mean, yes, middle corridor in a sense is bringing more Chinese goods to European market. In this way, energy resources will be included of the region. It may cause China to not to be able to buy cheap Uzbekistan energy fuel from Uzbekistan any longer, but it will add to the benefits of the Uzbekistan people, their citizens, to maybe benefit from this.
Now, in a time when we know about the Middle East conflict with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, how critical is this energy week for this region, and also about their importance to the global market?
This week is well put strategically. I think it is happening on a very sensitive moment, and I think all over the world there will be interest on this, because we all know there are huge resources in the region, not only in Uzbekistan, but Uzbekistan is wanting to be openly, wanting to be out and, you know, giving their resources, providing them to the Western markets. And this is happening on the very right moment. And thanks to Azerbaijan, they are putting their effort to provide, you know, the full support to the Uzbekistan government. And I think we will hear some positive in the end of the week towards more energy resources, alternative and fossil energy resources to the Western world from Uzbekistan after this week is ending.
Now, having said that, would you say that is Uzbekistan Energy Week ultimately, or is ultimately about commercial deals, or the emergence of a new regional energy architecture linking Central Asia and the South Caucasus and also the West?
I don't think this is only a commercial activity. I would not think so. I mean, if it was only a commercial activity, there is other resources everywhere else. But the world needs alternatives to the Persian Gulf, and this is only one of them. And I am truly believer of still a sustainable alternative energy resources. But as we speak, being also a tiny little farmer, I don't want to pay too much to my fertilizer. And Uzbekistan is also a good resource for fertilizers. Why not through this initiative they can provide cheaper carbamide, urea from Uzbeki production, along with gas or fuel. So I think this is not about only commercial perspective. I'm not looking from a commercial perspective. I think this is a strategical decisions, and whomever contributing to it, I think all over the world, I think it will be appreciated.
Well, sir, thank you very much for sharing your time and insight with us.
Thank you for allowing. Have a great day.
All right, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.